So here we have an orange OR100, and the complaint is consistent hum buzz with volume up. That could just be a tube, but I like to make sure. Sometimes there are bigger problems that don't exhibit until amps have been on for a while, or there's a reason tubes fail. Like many current production oranges, this one has the set screw knobs and the split shaft knurled pot shafts. That's never a good combination. It's lost this volume knob, and this one was very loose. I've checked the others. I'll see if the owner wants me to order one for him that goes on there, or at least stick some kind of knob on there, because these pots, this metal is very soft on the shaft, and without a knob it can easily be sheared off, and then you don't have any means of adjusting it, and you've got to pay a guy like me to pull everything apart to replace one $2 pot, and that's a silly expense. Let's open it up and see what's going on inside. It's got quite a bit of a buzz on it. It's present to a small degree on both channels and to a large degree on the higher gain channel. I'm going to let you hear a bit of that. And there are a couple of things that could be. Number one, first of all, I went through a bunch of stuff already. I ruled out preamp tubes. The tube that was here in V1 was extremely noisy and microphonic, so that was contributing to it. It used to have a lot more to it. This amp has separate heaters for the outputs and the preamp, and that buzz is only in the preamp. And these are the hum balance resistors for the preamp. They measure okay. That does not mean that they are good. I may be changing those out. The older version of this had a hum balance trim pot to fine tune that. They no longer do. That's probably for the best. Those little 3rd watt trim pots rarely make it in a heater supply. Second of all, even after cleaning, there's a lot of yuck in that dual gang gain pot for that stage. So that pot probably needs to be replaced, and that could actually be the cause of the noise. Third of all, it could be leaky DC. That's the kind of buzz that I associate with DC being where it ought not to be. But I've gone in here and measured all the places where DC would be if that were the case, and it's not present. I have the schematic pulled up, and I've got the thing hooked up to my scope. Yes, I do use them, and I have not been able to isolate it to an individual point. However, there is something very unusual in this model, at least this particular one. There is a zip tie here, which is pressing one side of the heater wire down. These are the heaters. And it's pressing it right by pin 7 of V1, which is a grid, which is very much used. And it makes no sense to me for that heater wire to be intentionally placed that close to a grid. It's obviously intentional. They have that, 2 holes in the board for this zip tie, but that makes no sense. So it's probably this dual gang gain pot, volume pot, or a bad solder joint somewhere. But just in case, as kind of a Hail Mary, because if it's not this, I'm going to have to pull the board up anyway. I'm going to remove this zip tie and move this wire away from that grid and see if it makes any difference. And if it magically sounds better with that wire there, well, I'll have the board up anyway and I can put in a new zip tie. So let me carefully, one hand behind my back so I don't touch the chassis, snip this zip tie and fish this out. I'm going to take it out of standby. And it seems to make no difference, but you could hear tapping in that area was causing some buzz. So let me extricate that zip tie real quick. I can always put it back, but I really don't think it's necessary. Back out of standby. Turn the master down a little bit for us. Interesting, I'm not getting it much now. I'm getting occasional thuds and thumps in this area. It makes me suspect solder joint. Let me power this all off. And let's see, where's a place where B plus would be that we don't want it to be? I'll make sure this thing is drained before I open it all up. I'll measure it. Well, I measure at pin 3, but I'm not sure which pin is pin 3 on these. I measure at the screen grid. Already down to 4 volts. So that's a very effective circuit as far as bleeding things off. And at the pin here, 3.7. So yeah, it's already bled itself out enough that I can pull this board. Let me show you what's involved with that. All right, to get this board out, my goal is to get it so it lifts up like that. I'm going to have to remove all the tubes after they've cooled off. I'm going to have to remove this board here, which has all the output jacks and the effects loop stuff. And right here you can see where I've hung my scope meters, my probe rather. Most of the wires over here I should be able to leave intact. I'm going to have to disconnect these quick connects from the standby switch, which is also the high-low power switch, and the channel changing switch. And hopefully that heat shrink won't be a slowdown. You know, it's not something that makes labor easy, but there's no way to desolder these wires here. And I'm going to have to desolder the wires from the lamp connection. I have to pull all the front hardware off and all the screws, and I already mentioned the tubes. This blue and black wire that goes here, I know I'm going to have to disconnect that and make sure that everything is written correctly, or I'll take notes so I can put it all back. So, I mean, all this, and I'm probably going to end up refilling 1 or 2 solder joints and changing out a $5 dual gang alpha pot. So we'll see where we end up. All right, it came out without too much trouble. The one overzealously crimped quick connect spade connector will have to be redone. It parted ways with itself rather than let go of the connection point, but that's easily done. A lot of corrosion in this area, a lot of liquid spill stuff, and right here, this is where the entire system ground is made, and there's a lot of buildup of yucky stuff here. This could be the root cause of a lot of things. So I'm going to clean this entire board, and particularly this area, with isopropyl, our friend. And I'm not sure if there's a lot of factory rework in this amp, because not all the solder joints match, or whether someone has gone in here and tried to reflow a bunch of stuff, because the solder joints don't match throughout the amp. Some are this dull silver from the lead-free, and some are much shinier, and there's not much rhyme or reason to it. I don't see any bad solder joints. I see a lot of solder joints that aren't pretty, and sometimes something which is not pretty is bad, just isn't obvious. The fault can be within the joint that you can't really see. So I'm going to let all this ISO do its work and clean up a lot of funk, and make sure that all the ground contact points there, especially, are clean going forward, and get all the flux off. There's some flux on the other side of the board and some shiny solder on the other side of the board where it really does look like either someone serviced this amp or there was some factory rework. But nothing seems to have been changed, just touched up solder joints. So I don't think that's the issue. I do not trust this dual gang 250K, dual gang 1 meg pot. It is very noisy despite multiple cleanings. And a potentiometer like this is also a resistor. It's a resistive track. It's a variable resistor in the true sense. And just like any resistor, it can develop noise, and that could just be the root cause of all this, or it could be a little bit of this and a little bit of that corrosion on the ground. I'll know more after a while. I've got to source that pot because the long shaft there makes this different than other dual gang split shaft knurled pots on the market. So I'm sure I can find it. But that's going to be something I'm going to have to order. So I think I'm going to bag up all the parts for this and put everything carefully to the side. But wow, I'm getting so much funk off that ground point. I'll have to clean the corresponding bit of the chassis. And of course, this side as well. But simple things like that can cause a host of problems. I am not a big fan of grounds like that made via relatively casual contact with dissimilar metals that can react to each other. But I famously don't have control over Judgment Day.